Hello everyone, thank you for joining us again. And today I am here with Jan Brumby, who is the CEO of For Entrepreneurs Only. Jan, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. And
Thank you.
The best place maybe for us to start is, because I've mentioned it, is to talk about For Entrepreneurs Only, or FEO as we'll refer to it from now on. So this is an amazing initiative, and I know you're working with all kinds of businesses across the region here in Hull. So can you tell us a little bit more about it, what you do, where it all started?
Yeah, well, firstly, the most important thing about FEO is that we're a community interest company. So we were formed probably 12 years ago now, and it was the idea of David Kilburn, who's Mr. MKM Building Supplies. A lot of people might know David, or at least know MKM. And it was David's sort of wish, really, for people who own businesses to be able to help one another with their problems, with the barriers that we're facing to growing, with, signposting to people who could help them to develop themselves and their businesses, really, because in this area, in Hull and the East Riding, an awful lot of businesses are small businesses, and it can be a very lonely place to be the owner of a business, when you need help.
And of course, and I suppose, particularly after the last couple of years as well, it's kind of felt more isolated for people, hasn't it? And I would imagine for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, it has. I mean, we all know, with the pandemic, depending on what your business sells or provides, if you're in the hospitality or restaurant or culture sector, it was horrendous, because everywhere had to close down. But then on the other side of things, construction and supplies and logistics and transport, really had to sort of step up, and they were sort of 3 times as busy, really.
Yeah.
But you've had people who were badly affected, even though their business was going through really, really tough times, they were still willing to help other people, which is brilliant, really.
Yeah, I think it's at those moments you start to see people pulling together, don't you?
Definitely, yeah.
So do you support people at all stages in their business, from very early startup businesses to really established businesses?
Yes, so what we've got, and if you sort of understand that all of our members are business owners, some of them own very big businesses, some of them own sort of 2, 3, 4 person businesses, just small SMEs. And our first program that we run is for startups. So it's people who have, what I call, jumped off the edge of the cliff. They've handed the notice in at work. They're going to do it. They're going to sort of have a go at this business that they've been wanting to, scratch the itch of. Or it's for people who have been sort of planning for quite a few years and have now sort of opened their shop or started their business, and they're finding that it's so much harder than they thought it would be.
Yeah.
No one's coming through the door. They're not making any money. So what we do is we run a Wednesday night session called Ignition, and it's for 7 Wednesday nights. We run one in the spring, one in the autumn, and anybody who's a startup business can come and learn from our members who have, they've been there, they've done it themselves. So it's a little bit like when a lady's had a baby and you go to a group, where there's lots of mums there, and you can all sort of help each other. A lot of our members share their mistakes and their failures, because we want people to know in the startup world that it's not going to be plain sailing. You're going to have some really massive problems to deal with. And just to give a reality check, really, of how to build the resilience and the problem solving to be able to not let that get you down.
Yeah. Are you seeing, I'm kind of going back to the last couple of years, but are you seeing more people kind of wanting to start up businesses now, just because maybe there's been a bit of a circuit breaker in the daily job and people think, actually, now's the time to follow that dream and set up this particular business?
Well, that's an interesting one, because before the pandemic, we were finding that, because when we think back now, it was quite a decent time before the pandemic. It wasn't a recession. But usually for people starting their business, there quite often is a sort of a critical thing happens, like they might be made redundant, you know, or they might have a family situation, or they might just be like very unhappy in their day job. Or they might be doing a job for someone else for sort of minimum wage, thinking, I could do this for myself, you know. And they're not, it's not just money driven. A lot of them do it, like you just said, for lifestyle. You know, they might just want to have a go at something where they are in control of their life, you know, rather than feel that they're on the treadmill, etc. So there's loads of different circumstances for people starting up a business. But they've all got the same problems, really, you know, to have to deal with, and we want them to be ready to face them.
Yeah, because obviously the theme of these chats that we're having is International Women's Day. Are we seeing more women, young women, older women starting businesses?
Yeah, definitely. When I first came to FEO, which was 10 years ago now, and we had, for instance, our ignition program for startups, in a room of, say, 30 startups, there might be 2 women. And just the last one we did, which was just as we came out of lockdown in 2021, the women outnumbered the men. And a few people did comment on it and say, you know, it's amazing, really, because there were women of all ages in the room, you know, literally from their early 20s up to the late 50s, you know, who had the confidence and the ambition, you know, to sort of give it a go. So, and a lot of women as well start businesses that, like we all know, when you've got a family and you've got children, a lot of women want to run their business around their family life, you know, so it definitely isn't a 9 to 5, you know, it might be we've got a couple of our females who literally work every Saturday and Sunday in their business, because that's when they need, you know, that's when they need to run it, because it's a service-based business. But it means that they can take their children to school every day, you know, so they're sort of in control of it, which is great, really.
And brilliant, like you say, that the kind of, there's more women and that means more support for other women.
Yeah, and it's good because, you know, one of our members, Sally Ray, a lot of ladies might know Sally. She owns a tool hire business called Go Hire, you know, and she's a perfect example of someone who, she's got 3 children, an extremely busy life, and, you know, she is very much task driven. So she has tasks for her family, tasks for herself, tasks for the business, and of course, which a lot of women often forget, which is you've got to have some time for yourself, you know. Whatever you do in your life, you've got to have a little bit of time for yourself, otherwise you will burn out, definitely.
I think that's something that really gets forgotten, doesn't it? There's so many people that we're continually putting before ourselves, and like you say, so many tasks to do. From the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, you're making sure certain things are ready. I don't know, in our house, uniforms are ready, packed lunches are ready, so there's not a panic in the morning. It's a continual list of things, and you do forget just to have just 5 minutes for yourself sometimes, don't you?
That's right.
So I'm really interested, Jan, because I just think you've got a really interesting career history. So you started out at the Midland Bank, didn't you, which is now the HSBC?
Yes, yeah.
So would you mind just talking us through a little bit about your career and kind of how you ended up at this point now?
Yeah, well, it's quite an interesting thing, really, but I was thinking about this and how opportunities or careers and things can lead to something else. So in my career, a potted history is that I started work at the Midland Bank, which then became HSBC. And as part of my job, I was asked to volunteer to run school banks. So I don't know if they have them anymore, but it was a school savings club where I would go in working at the bank, help all the children to open their school banks, which gets them into good habits saving.
Yeah.
And then while I was there, I was asked if I wanted to volunteer for Young Enterprise, which is a charity that helps young people to learn about business. So I volunteered for that. And then that led to a job working for Young Enterprise. So I actually sort of jumped camps, really. Yeah. And then I also worked for a spell at the university for a short while when I just had my first daughter. And the university got involved in Young Enterprise as well. So it's always been around sort of young people, education, enterprise, teaching young people to have enterprising skills. And then while I was at Young Enterprise running that, a couple of my volunteers told me that FEO, for Entrepreneurs Only, was a new thing that had just started up and that they were looking for someone to run it. So I applied for the job, which I've got now. So, they were sort of stepping stones along the way. Yeah. But the interesting thing about all of them was that all of my opportunities came through me volunteering and other people who were volunteers that I got to know. It wasn't sort of a career move, if you know what I mean. It wasn't sort of being promoted within that organisation. Yeah. It was all volunteer led. So what I would say there is that if you have got any time in your life to do any volunteering for anything, and there are so many needy causes, it can often open doors to things that you wouldn't expect.
Do you mind me asking what kind of projects you volunteered on, Jan?
When I was at the bank, or?
Yeah, just generally.
Yeah, so when I was at the bank, Young Enterprise at the time was sort of managed really by HSBC. It didn't have any employees of its own. So we used to organise trade fairs. So all the young people that were running the companies within the schools, selling and making things, would be invited to trade fairs like at the Princess Quay or a local shopping centre. And then we would be there on the day, sort of with our high-vis jackets on, sort of looking after the children or being there in case they had any problems, helping them to set the stall up. And then afterwards, we would put on training evenings for them. So we'd put training evenings for the sales team to learn how to sell more things. And in order to do that, we had to get volunteers from the business community to come and do a session. So when I think back to it now, it was amazing, really, because all of that was done by volunteers, and a lot of the things I've done in my life that have been sort of a volunteer, I've done for things to help young people. I've done other volunteering that's sort of typical, helping people and, for things like that are going on at the moment, in Ukraine, where suddenly you're asked to volunteer for things, that are getting wagons full of clothing and things ready. And although there are things like that really need people's help, it's amazing really how many people step up, when something happens on a one-off basis, really.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking, what really comes across is this connection between people and talking and just keeping on connecting. Because one of the things that I've read about you that I completely agree with and I love is, in an article you said that you don't need academic qualifications to be successful.
No, and I haven't, I've got my GCSEs going back to when I went to Amy Johnson School, in Hull, and I didn't go to sixth form. I didn't do A-levels. I didn't go to university. I haven't really done what you would call professional qualifications. I've done a few sort of management and what have you training courses and things like that, but all of my experience and knowledge is through learning by doing, really. you know, and other people really. You see someone and how they work and how they operate and how they communicate, and you think, well, I'm going to do it like that. You know, so I definitely am a people person, and I think my mobile phone has probably got more outgoing calls than probably anybody else's in Hull, because I still believe that picking up the phone and ringing someone is so much, it's so much more worthwhile than, you know, than just messaging. And because it's so easy nowadays just to send a message to someone, you know, whereas having a one-to-one call about something is so much better.
Yeah, yesterday I was talking to the Reverend Alison White, and we were talking about this idea of connection and kind of how we can begin to not make sense of, but deal with things that have happened in the world recently and that are ongoing. And she was talking through some of her kind of strategies for dealing with it on a daily basis. And one of the things that really came out of that was just taking 5 minutes to ring somebody or just connect with somebody, because the days are just so busy, aren't they, that sometimes they can just go past and you put off maybe messaging that friend or that person. But actually those seconds of interaction or that phone call can just make a world of difference, because it's all about the connection between us, isn't it?
That's right. And I think, you know, I think for younger people nowadays, they're probably out of, well, they won't ever be in the habit. You know, I can imagine they've got so many free minutes on their phone, you know, on their mobile phone contracts, but they probably don't use any of them. But I think for my generation, it's really important to, you know, like with my brothers and sisters who are scattered around, you know, doing one of my brothers is a vicar. You know, I've got brothers and sisters. I've got one in the film industry. I've got one in education. I've got one in the care sector. We're never all available at the same time, you know, usually to get together in person. So I usually ring them all, you know, at least once a week, just to check in and see how they are. And, you know, and that's really important to me, because even families, you know, even families are finding it hard to stay in touch through, you know, in-person meetings and things, which is, it's sad, really.
Yeah. Younger people today will never know the joy of waiting in a queue for a payphone, will they?
No. And it's, I went to see the new Hull Truck performance, 71 Coltman Street the other day, and that, you know, it was, I won't spoil the story, but an integral part of the set is a telephone box, you know, and going into a phone box with your money, you know, to make a call. I can remember when I was young, that's how you'd phone your friends. You know, you'd actually go to the phone box. So yeah, it all seems like a million miles away now.
Which has led me really neatly on to my next question, Jan, because you've mentioned Hull Truck. So I know the arts are a really big part of your life. You are in the Beautiful Couch, which is a Beautiful South Housemartins tribute band. And also you're the president of Hessel Theatre Company, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I absolutely love anything to do with, you know, theatre mainly. Theatre's my main one. Music, I don't like all kinds of music, but sort of 70s and 80s, I absolutely love. And so when I got the opportunity to, which I never thought in a million years I ever would, so a little bit of background to the Beautiful Couch. The Beautiful Couch is a tribute band to the Beautiful South and the Housemartins, and most people in Hull absolutely love Paul Heaton and those two bands. And my sister Liz was the original female singer in the Beautiful Couch, and then going back quite a few years now, she went off on maternity leave and just asked me if I would be willing to step in while she was away. And I just thought, well, I'll give it a go. And it was extremely nerve-wracking. And I had to learn, you know, 35 songs. I'd never sang sort of in that kind of way before. I'd sang in church and I'd sang sort of in choirs and things like that. But it felt very I can't really explain. It felt very sort of out of my comfort zone standing there, because if anything goes wrong, there's nowhere to hide. But I really enjoyed it, to be honest. And then she went on maternity leave again. So she had 2 children quite close together. And then she sort of said that she was happy for me to stay. You know, she had other things. She was studying for a degree. She had a young family. So I sort of took over from her, as it turned out. Yeah. And it's great. Yeah, I mean, we haven't done a lot of gigs, obviously, throughout the pandemic, but we're up and running again now. There are 6 of us in the band, and I don't know, we do about 12 gigs a year, including Trib Fest, which is an amazing sort of festival at Glastonbury, but it's completely for tribute bands. It's amazing. Yeah, really, really good. And so that's the Beautiful Couch.
Yeah.
And then we've got Hessel Theatre Company, which I got involved with a few years ago. I'm not actually in the musicals. But what I did was I started supporting them again by going along and buying tickets for the productions. They do a production at Hull New Theatre in the springtime, then they do one at Hull Truck in the autumn, and then they do a brilliant pantomime at Hessel Town Hall just near Christmas. So I got the bug and started going along, and now I'm president of Hessel Theatre Company. And I think the reason they asked me was that A, I'm very passionate about it, and B, I want to try and help them to grow as a company, which, bearing in mind it's the centenary of Hessel Theatre this year.
Wow.
They've been going 100 years, and for an amateur theatre company, they're just amazing. I mean, at the end of this month, at Hull New Theatre. And it's going to be, you might see on bus stops at the moment, you'll see like the adverts for it. And so, you know, it's a couple of the evenings and the Saturday matinee are almost sold out, oh, wow. You know, at Hull New Theatre. So they've got an extremely good reputation, and they put on sort of professional quality shows, you know, but they are an amateur company. You know, all of the members have got other jobs, and they've got families, and they volunteer their time, and they're so talented. So yeah, so I'm really enjoying being involved in Hessel Theatre Company.
Oh, amazing. Well, our time's nearly up, Jan, but I did have one more question for you, which, again, going back to International Women's Day, I wanted to ask, you've done so much work in so many different sectors, and I'm really interested in, for you, have you seen changes in the opportunities available to women over that time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely. I mentioned to you about Ignition, you know, going from 2 women to the majority of the delegates being women. I think, you know, I feel that the opportunities are there. But I just feel that, you know, if a woman does want to have a family, you know, and does have a family, there's always going to be that sort of, you've got to spread yourself very thin. You know, you want to be all things to everybody. You want to do everything well. You know, you feel guilty about missing family things when you've got to do work things, and you feel guilty about letting work down when you've got to do family things. So I think that will always be there, but I think that if you are the type of woman that is, you know, I know lots of women in different situations where if you work out what it is and how you're going to get there, you will find a way, whether or not you're a single parent, you know, whether or not you're a woman who doesn't have children, or you might be a little bit more mature and your children have fled the nest and they've gone off and you're having a second career. But I'm not personally, I'm not the type of woman who gets involved in a lot of things that are women only. women only groups and things, because I feel in our group for Entrepreneurs Only, we have everything together, because we've got single parent men in our group, who have just exactly the same problems of, time and childcare. And, so we like to do everything where we have the men and the women helping each other.
Yeah.
And I've got a few peer groups where my female members, will get together every now and again and talk about some of the problems they've got, and it works out really well. But I definitely think, like at the university, where we have an office, the number of female students now that are at university, it's amazing. From when I was young, I didn't even go to university, but it seems to be that at least every other student is a female. So I definitely think it is, in general, the world is a much better place, I think, now to be a female.
Yeah, I think we've come a long way and still a long way to go, but that's great.
Yeah.
And I love hearing you talk just about, again, we're coming back to this idea of connection, which seems to be a theme. And I don't know if it is because after the pandemic, our connection has strengthened and we're reconnecting, but the fact that people can come together and talk, and so important, like you've said, to talk about successes and failures.
Yeah, definitely. And our members are not afraid to talk about when things went wrong and why they went wrong, which is why if you learn from other people's mistakes, you're much less likely to make those yourself, if you really want to succeed.
Yeah. Jan, it's been really brilliant talking to you, and thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.